Small level of self-awareness that we're given, but with every experience, every sound, every wrapper package that is opened, every drawer that is closed, we're logging it and we're able to grow from these experiences. And just like you said, it can also come from our childhood, it can come from society, it can definitely be taught. But the longer you're alive, the more opportunity you have to build the self-awareness.
or to also lose it. So some
Mm.
ways to lose the self-awareness, like it's not necessarily that it's lost per se, it's that you're not aware of it. It's like hidden and those the way it kind of goes away temporarily is for one autopilot. And I was talking to Dan about this, my husband, yesterday. I had this dream years ago that was super powerful. And you know, in cartoons where there's like those big black bombs with like the thing, and then you light it and it's like going and then it explodes. So my
Hmm.
dream was this huge black bomb, like the size of a house, and it was in the middle of the street, and the fuse was lit and it was about to go off. And then on the side of it was like thousands of people at a concert, and they're all like, yeah, and they're just like having fun, and they're totally unaware that they're all about to die because this big black cartoon bomb is right next to them. And I am like shouting from another building through a window, like, guys, there's a bomb. You gotta move. And they had no idea. They were unaware of their surroundings. They couldn't hear me. They couldn't see the bomb. And it was because of this distraction. And I'm gonna be careful and say that not all music is bad, not all media is bad, but it can consume us. And if we are constantly scrolling on social media, if we're only listening to music, if we come home and we drop off our keys, take off our shoes, and turn on the TV, we're completely zoning out and we're unaware of our thoughts, our emotions, the temperature in the room, what our pets need, what our kids need, what our self needs, because we are distracted. And that autopilot behavior is a perfect formula for losing any kind of self awareness internally or externally.
Welcome to the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast, where you master your mind and coach your own comeback. You are the hero, you are the guide, and you will learn to architect your life from the inside. I'm your host, Britannia Stowe, joined by my sister and co host, Annika Wilder. Enjoy the show. Last week, we were talking about how to find the motivation to quit a bad habit. But one of the topics we brought up was self awareness. How do you know if you even have a bad habit if you are completely unaware, right? Building self awareness is one of the core principles of self help and personal growth because it brings in your inner world out of the shadows and into the light. The moment you start to notice your patterns, you stop being controlled by them. And that's when real change begins. Annika, how do you feel about self awareness?
I'm super excited. This is something I talk about all the time because if you are not aware of your behaviors, the way you're talking, your body language, your patterns, your trauma triggers, like you can't change, you can't function as highly as at a higher rate, like as well as you would like to. You can't perform as well. You won't achieve as well. Self-awareness is one of the first steps. I mean, they even talk about this in like AA, right? If you go to AA, what's the first step?
Admitting that you have a problem?
Yeah, exactly. And how can you admit you have a problem if you don't know you have a problem and you're aware of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this is like the precursor to any change that somebody wants. It's super important.
Well, absolutely. And I think a lot of people are unaware. They lack so much self awareness, they don't know that they lack self awareness. So I thought it would be a good idea to first list, and I had like 30 listed down when I was preparing for this podcast. I actually drummed it down a little bit, but let's list a few ways that not being self aware or lacking self awareness shows up. One of the
Okay.
big ones that comes off, off the top of my head is tone of voice. So, with my husband, this comes up all the time because it sounds like he's yelling all the time. And I'm like, babe, like, why are you yelling at me? I'm not yelling. I was like, I feel like you're yelling. And he just doesn't realize the intensity behind his voice. He might not actually be yelling or screaming, but there's such intensity, and the tone is maybe sharp or a little dismissive or defensive. And while he thinks he's having a regular conversation in a regular tone of voice, it can actually come off as yelling to my very sensitive ears.
Yeah, that's huge. So tone of voice, so it can show up. So you're saying if anybody doesn't have a lack of, or it doesn't have a self-awareness, that
Mhm.
it can show up in one of these as tone of voices. What are some other ways that you would recognize someone not having self-awareness?
Well, not being considerate to others because you're so focused internally on your experience. You know, when you walk through a door and there's someone behind you, but you don't hold it open for them because you're totally unaware that they're there. Reacting instead of responding. So, snapping at someone or shutting down or spiraling, when you're getting triggered, these are all reactions instead of pausing and choosing to respond. I would also add repeating the same patterns. So
Mm.
you first want to recognize you have a haven't done that yet, right? Because you're lacking some self-awareness. So you keep dating the same awful guy. I did this. I dated the same deadbeat person over and over. There were 12 different people, but it was basically the same archetype of individual. And it was just this constant pattern. This could also be with habits or taking a job. So these repeating patterns could be a sign that you're lacking some self-awareness.
Yeah, the question that people always ask is like, why does this keep happening to me? Like, they're just totally unaware of where they can be accountable to the patterns that are repeating.
Absolutely. I would also add taking things personally. This is also a sign. Like, I know I struggled this when I was younger. I thought the world kind of revolved around me for better or for worse. So if someone was having a bad day, it was my fault. If someone was having a good day, it was my fault. And so it's really ridiculous, now that I say it out loud and, I look back on my, early 20s, but I literally took everything so dang personally. And that was because I lacked a level of self-awareness. Annika, I think of the four agreements here, right? What's one of the four agreements?
Yeah, don't take anything personally. And like you said, if you take things personally, that's implying that it's all about you, and it's not. And you're not thinking about other people. It's actually quite selfish when you take things personally because you're not even taking into consideration, kind of like what you said earlier, being considerate of others. You're not aware of what other people might be thinking or needing or feeling.
Absolutely. What others come to mind for, signs of lacking self-awareness?
I know for me, I am a mom. I get overstimulated and overwhelmed. And if I'm not recognizing and being aware of like where my emotional limits are, I am often just quick to like shut down or start crying or just go to like I'm overloaded, I'm overstimulated, I'm overwhelmed because I'm just not recognizing the boundaries or the emotional limits that I do have because I'm not checking in with myself.
Yeah, I can relate to that one. Even before becoming a mom, I struggled with that as well. What's another one that comes to mind?
Maybe like over explaining or under communicating because maybe I think my husband does this sometimes and it kind of makes me laugh where we'll be having a conversation and he'll say, "Let me help you understand," when I already understood the first time. And he will start doing an analogy. And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that really drove in the point." And then he'll do another analogy. I'm like, I got it not only the first time, but I also got it the first analogy. And now it's like another analogy. And I think maybe he's not aware of me saying, like, yeah, I get it.
Well, this is where the term mansplaining comes from, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, no, I got it. I don't need you to break it down in small words for me. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes he'll be like, "Oh, I don't think you get it." And I'm like, "Well, I do." So then I need to try to explain. So that could be me under explaining because I'm not aware of his response, right? When I say I
Mhm.
understand, I'm not showing that I understand. So it can go both ways, over explaining or under explaining.
Yeah, I know that I will struggle with this where I feel that the thoughts are so clear in my head, but when I speak, it doesn't always come out as clear, especially if I'm in a conflict or a disagreement. And so I will under explain and then I'll feel inadequate for under explaining. So then I'll over communicate and then my voice will get raised because I'm frustrated because I'm saying the same thing over and over. And that does come from a lack of self awareness.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's another one too, speaking of relationships, there's like the attachment styles, and there's the avoidant attachment, and then there's the secure attachment and the anxious attachment. I think there
Hmm.
might be more, but those are like the three big ones. And they're people who are avoidant because they want to avoid criticism, they want to avoid an argument, and so they're not being self-aware that they are even doing it. Like they just start avoiding. They just go in another direction, and it takes the other partner to say like, why are you avoiding this? And they're like, oh, I wasn't avoiding it. And then they become defensive, and you're like, now you're becoming defensive. And like because they're so unaware of their habits and their actions and these patterns that they have because of maybe one of their attachment styles.
Yeah, absolutely. I would even say that, leads us into the next one of feeling disconnected from your emotions, right? So you're feeling that something is off, but you can't name it. And a lot of
Mhm.
people in today's society will just put it in anxiety. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling anxious. And if you are feeling anxious and naming that, and we'll go into that in a little bit, does help. But often there are other emotions that you are feeling that have gone neglected or unnamed. And so you've just put them in this bucket of feeling anxious. And if the only emotion you can ever name is anxiety, that's another sign that you're probably lacking some self-awareness.
Yeah, totally. And then there's one more that you had. I know there's so much more that we could say, but it's arguing to be right instead of understanding what's really going on inside of you. I am guilty of this. I don't like being wrong. I always want to be right, and anytime someone tells me where I'm wrong, I immediately like have guards that go up because I'm like, "Well, what's the right things that I did?" And just because somebody says something that you did wrong that maybe could use correction, it doesn't mean you didn't do anything right. But that's what my mind calculates is like I immediately go into this reaction of everything I do is wrong. And,
Mhm.
sometimes my husband would be like, I didn't say everything. I'm just talking about this one thing. And then it kind of puts him in this place where then he has to say, well, okay, let's talk about all the things you did right just so you feel better. And instead of being able to be mature enough to just take those things instead of arguing to be right, you can just listen to the feedback that others are giving.
Yeah, absolutely. My husband, he doesn't do this as much anymore, but in the beginning of our relationship, he would definitely argue to be right. He is a great debater. He loves to be on Twitter and debate things with strangers. And I'm not that way, even though I did model UN. I don't actually love a great debate. And so he would always argue to be right. And then he would get to the point where I would say, hey, it's not about who's being right or wrong. So instead of saying, am I right? He goes, am I wrong? Am I wrong? I'm like, it's the same question. So
So
that
funny.
is a common one for sure. And so these are just some ways, right, that it can show up as a lack of self-awareness. And there were so many. I'd just dial it down a little bit. I'll go into so much more detail in my book into this. I've already started to write this chapter. But let's talk about, okay, so now we know these are the signs of lacking self-awareness. So what is self-awareness and how do we break this down? And I broke it down by internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. So internal self-awareness is understanding your inner world, right? These are the moments when you are tuned in to your thoughts and your emotions, your triggers, and your needs and how they show up for you without any other influence on anyone else. And then you have external self awareness, which is how these moments of being aware can impact others and the people around you. Annika brought up a really good point that that also includes physical self awareness. But let's first dive into internal self-awareness. Annika, what are some examples of internal self-awareness?
Yeah, so this is again everything that's inside the body. So these are your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, the patterns and belief systems you have. It's like everything that is like living inside of you and wreaking havoc, right? And so this could be like being aware of your feelings. And so sometimes if we're snapping at people, like those symptoms that you were talking about, like the tone of voice or arguing to be right or feeling overwhelmed, we're not realizing what we're feeling way before we get to that breaking point. And so my counselor a long time ago called this like flooding, when you like feel it, like anxiety or like the overwhelm where it's just building, 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 and you're just trying to fight it because you're trying to keep it together. You're saying, I won't be defensive. I won't argue. I can do this. I'm not overwhelmed. I can handle this and this and this and this. And then all of a sudden you explode because you're actually flooding this whole time. And so if we turn into ourselves, we can understand like, okay, I'm feeling it about this level. This is when I'm at this level of flooding, like up to the chest, like I kind of think of it like a liquid filling your body. When it is like up to the chest, that's when I need to bow out and take a break. And you are capable of noticing this. It's just tuning into yourself, taking a break and not being so quick to like respond. I know we'll get to the coaching part, but this is so important. It's just like meditation is part of it, but it can be so quick. Like anyone listening to this podcast right now can tune into their thoughts and their emotions and just like, what am I feeling right now? Oh man, I haven't eaten all day. I'm hungry. Just think about what you're feeling. So first noticing the feeling, I would say is a huge one for that internal self-awareness.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up flooding because I imagine a cartoon. So when when they get really, hot, overheated, angry, they blow steam out of their ears and they actually blow their top, right? It's that same thing. And I know that I've struggled with, flooding because what happens is I feel it in my chest and then all of a sudden it's at my eyes. Before I know it, my top has been blown off. And it happens so quickly. And so that's why building that self-awareness to notice that small change in your chest or maybe in your stomach. And maybe it doesn't start in your stomach, maybe it starts in your throat. But as soon as you notice it, notice that feeling, you're able to make a change. So recognizing a trigger is just the same way, right? When someone interrupts me, if that is a big trigger for you, you want to know that. You want to be self-aware that when someone interrupts you, I shut down because it reminds me of not being heard, growing up, or when someone yells. This was a big one for me. When someone yells at me, we were, yelled at a lot as a kid, but also in my abusive relationship. To me, when someone's voice gets that intense, that means violence will follow. And so I get really scared and I shut down and I go into like survival mode. So understanding these triggers, not only, and again, we'll go into more detail in the coach yourself segment, but not only in the moment, but being able to let people know ahead of time, if you're having a deep conversation saying, hey, listen, just so you know, I get really triggered when people interrupt me. So if you can just let me finish my thoughts and being able to communicate that beforehand shows really great internal self-awareness. I would even elaborate on spotting a pattern. You mentioned that as well. Like noticing that you're always procrastinating when you're afraid that something isn't going to be perfect. Oh, we talked about that a little bit last time, how I will put off, keeping promises to myself because I have this, perception of failure if it's not done perfectly. And so I have this pattern. And in lieu of this, podcast, I made sure I was like, okay, we're going to build some self-awareness. We are going to work on this first, and then the other work we're going to work on later. And so by doing that, you can break some of those patterns. Annika,
Mhm.
what else would you add with internal self-awareness?
This is a big one. It's understanding your needs. So, as women, we constantly feel like we need to put other people above ourselves. We're good at doing this. We put our children first, we put our husbands first, we put our friends first, sisters, brothers, parents, like coworkers. We put everybody first because we have a servant's heart. I mean, this is, I think, ingrained in who we are. We just are nurturing, we want to help people. How we can be self aware is understanding what our needs are and communicating them. There is nothing wrong with saying, I need alone time. There's nothing wrong with saying, I need a few minutes to decompress when I come home from work. Or when you come home from work, I need you to take the baby or the kids so that I can just have a minute of peace and quiet. Like I would really like to take a shower, go to the bathroom without little fingers climbing under the doors. Like, it's okay to communicate these things. There's nothing wrong with having needs. There's nothing wrong with taking a minute for yourself because the more that you are self aware of these needs, you can let other people know. And your spouse, your partner, your friends, your family, they're not going to be like, you need too much. I can't give you 10 minutes. I can't give you alone time. They're never going to do that. But I think sometimes as women we think I can't ask for this because then I feel selfish or I can't speak up because of what they might think of us. But that's not the case. If anyone tells you, like Britannia, if I say, hey, I need to go to the bathroom real quick. Like that's a need that I have. You're not going to be like, what? No, you can't go to the bathroom. Like I need you to be here. You're going to say, okay, cool, I'll wait. Right.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so just understanding what you need. And sometimes that takes some self-reflection and writing it down. Like it's not always obvious. A lot of the times women are notorious for saying, I don't know what I need, but I need something. And so we need to take responsibility and maybe write it down, talk about what we want. If you're feeling unhappy, is it because you don't have enough connection or community? Is it because you didn't eat today? Is it because you didn't sleep? Like maybe your need is just more sleep. Maybe it's you need a snack. Maybe you need to call your sister and vent. Like whatever it is, like it's okay to communicate it, but first we need to be aware of what those needs actually are.
Yeah, and communicate them as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I had a moment yesterday when my husband came home and it had been a long day. We're recovering from being sick. My dog was sick and had some accidents in the house, and I had no help yesterday. My nanny wasn't working, and it was just me with the baby, and it was just a lot. And then my husband comes home and gives me some news and has a difficult conversation with me, and all I wanted to do was go work out. And I'm watching the time go as we're having this deep conversation. And I'm like, I just want to work out. And I missed, bar class and I missed yoga class. And it's too late to go to the big gym. And then he finally tells me that he's going to go into the office and he's going to work on his project. And I'm thinking, I just need 45 minutes to move my body. I just need 45 minutes for him to take the baby. And so I was like, I'm waiting for him to offer. I don't know why, right? Like I'm waiting, just bring it up yourself. It's so hard to sometimes communicate your needs. But if I am self-aware enough to know what my need is, well, then I need to communicate it. And so I went to my husband. I said, would it be okay if I just took 45 minutes and went to the apartment gym and did a quick workout? And without hesitation, he said, yeah, of course, go for it. And
See,
we
and he had
build
no
it up in our
problem.
head, right?
We do. We really do. And this is something that like we need to take responsibility for. Like I feel like as empowering other women, we need to remind women like speak up. No one can read your mind. Women understand each other. Like, oh, here, what do you need? Do you need a blanket? Do you need a snack? Let me take the baby because we understand each other. Men don't know the
Mhm.
spaghetti brains that we have, and we have to speak up or they will never know.
This this brings up external self-awareness, right? So understanding how others experience you and your impact on others. So just like you said, women, we know. I don't know how many times I have walked into a room and I don't even know that I have a need, but then, someone else goes, "Hey, why don't I take the baby?" Or, "Do you need a break? Would you like to go eat?" And I'm like, actually, yes, I would love it if you took the baby and I would love to use the bathroom. Thank you. And because they're aware, right? But not everyone builds that external self-awareness. And an example is tone awareness. We already brought up tone before, how it shows up when you're lacking self-awareness. So realizing that your voice sounds sharper when you are stressed or you had a long day or a long commute. It comes up with recognizing what that is first before you can change it. So tone awareness, because to you, it may sound fine, right? We sound differently internally than we do to others. But if you're aware that I maybe am sensitive or your tone of voice can shift after a long commute, that will show that you're building that external self-awareness.
Absolutely. This is something I was trying to train my kids on recently because they make these noises. Like, do you know that scene in Dumb and Dumber where he's like, "Do you want to hear the most annoying noise in the world?"
Oh
And then
my
he's like,
gosh.
ah,
I
right?
was going to say, don't do it.
And it is the most annoying noise in the world. And sometimes my kids will be like smacking their lips, or like Anders, my son, will just randomly be like la 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 la, not like making these like noises. And it's kind of like, nails on a chalkboard or like tapping a pen over and over and over. And so we were having this conversation in the car, and because they annoy each other, my son and daughter will annoy each other. And so we're talking about what is annoying and what's not annoying. And so we played a game. I said, if I say, "Do you want to play with me?" and you say no, then I would say, "Okay, no problem. I'll find someone else to play with." Is that annoying? And they go, "No, that's not annoying." But then if I say, "Do you want to play?" and you say no, and then I go, "Man, you never play with me." And then like the tone is like really whiny and pouty. They're like, "Oh my gosh, mom, that's so annoying." I'm like, right? And so I was trying to help them understand that there are subtle tone differences in how we talk that can be annoying to other people. And I want them to be true to themselves, but I also want them to have respectful voices, and I want them to be liked in society. And that has to do with self-awareness, like how you come off. And without spending too much time on this, I know, Britannia, you used to have like a higher voice, and some people would talk about how high your voice was. And I don't remember if it was mom or grandma, but they would say something
Grandma.
about it. It was
It was
grandma.
grandma. Yeah.
And you actually changed the tone of your voice. Like maybe it was
Mhm.
hard to hear, but you became self-aware. You didn't know that you
Mhm.
were like talking like this. Oh my gosh. And all of a sudden you calmed your voice down, and it's a very
Mhm.
soothing voice, and it's actually very pleasant to listen to. And that was something that you actively worked on, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I totally forgot about that, but I sounded like Minnie Mouse, and that's what Grandma said. And she would call, and I would pick up the house phone. This is before, like, well, not before. I guess we had cell phones, but we had a corded house phone, and I picked up the phone and I would answer, and every time Grandma would be like, "Who is this? Is this Johanna? Is this, some small child?" And I was like, No, Grandma." And I would be in my mid 20s. I was like, "Grandma, it's Britannia." She goes, "Oh, goodness. You sound like Minnie Mouse." I was like, "Oh, okay." But I was grateful. I was actually grateful for the feedback because I didn't realize that I had such a high pitched voice. And I would watch myself on video or hear myself, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, why does anyone listen to me? Like, I sound awful." And so, yeah, building that self-awareness, absolutely. I would also add understanding emotional impact. So, an example will be when I shut down during a conflict, this other person feels ignored and not protected. So, even though I might feel safe by shutting down, some people like to talk out in a conflict right away, and other people like to go and stew with their thoughts. But usually the other person has an opposite need, right? So if there's a conflict and I really want to talk it out, and my husband would like to just leave it alone until we both cool off and then come back around, by me forcing him to talk it out because it's about me and it's about my needs is lacking self-awareness. It doesn't mean I always have to concede to his needs, but being aware that by making him talk and forcing him into my way is selfish, and it shows a lack of external self-awareness.
Yeah, it's the same thing with like reading the room, right? Like there's people out there that will just talk and talk and talk and talk and not realize like this might not be the right time. Like if somebody's actively working on their computer and you just walk into their office and start talking, they're totally unaware of like reading the room. Like this is not the right time, especially if someone's not turning to talk to you. Like look at their body language, like notice that there the way that people are reacting to you. This is like the external awareness, and this is same thing with like your physical movements. Like I struggle with good posture, and it wasn't until my husband took a picture of me when I was like on my phone, like hunched over, and my neck was like at a 90-degree angle.
Oh
And
no.
I was like, oh goodness, I didn't know I looked like that. Like I was totally unaware of my physical body. Same thing with my son. He is becoming more internally aware, but his external awareness, he's still learning. Not realizing there's a car coming when he walks in the middle of the road, or he trips on a toy, or he's like follows you around the kitchen while you're cooking, and then I bump into him and I'm like, what are you doing? You gotta be aware of your surroundings. This is a safety issue. Like be aware. Or for me, I tend to thump. Like that's an external awareness that I didn't realize I was doing until dad pointed it out when I was a kid. Like we always know when Annika's coming because she's thumping. And, he wasn't aware and grandma wasn't aware of how their tone comes off kind of offensive, but it made me aware. And now when I'm walking, I can take note like, okay, if I want to walk quietly, I need to change the way I walk because naturally I'm a heavy-footed person, right? So there's a
Mhm.
lot of like physical awareness of what we're doing. You might smack somebody in the face because your arms are so big when you're talking. We need to be physically aware. These are the external awarenesses that are super important to social interactions, to business, to relationships, etc.
I'm so glad you elaborated on that because I think that is an area where a lot of people struggle and they just, chalk it up to, oh, I'm a little clumsy, or, I mean well, but it is an actual lack of self-awareness. One more I would add is behavior reflection. So, noticing how your defensiveness when someone gives you feedback can make other people feel unsafe. So if, every time dad brought up your heavy, footedness, or grandma brought up my voice, if I got defensive or you got defensive every time, then we wouldn't get that feedback. And so making sure that you're aware of how your emotions are being reflected out and your behavior is being reflected onto other people. So let me ask you, we've now talked about how the lack of self-awareness shows up and breaking down self-awareness into internal and external. Annika, do you think you're born with self-awareness?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think when you watch babies, which you're probably recognizing now, they notice every sound, right? Like every sound they react. Like I remember opening a package and it was like, oh, they immediately looked. Or I'd close a drawer and they would immediately look. And like every sound they were just paying attention to. So I think there is some innate self-awareness, but I think that this has to be taught. I think we have to um, learn it from our parents, learn it from mentors. I think that there are some innate things, and I think there are some things that we will never understand until someone puts it in front of us.
I couldn't agree with you more. I believe that we are born with a level of self-awareness, and that is how we survive. As a baby, my son Harvey has to be self-aware enough to know that he is hungry so that he can cry because he doesn't know how to speak yet. So he can cry, I am hungry. I'm feeling a feeling of hunger. And so whether he's sucking on his fist or he's crying, he is self-aware enough and communicating that. And so there is that level of self-awareness, but for him it's very small. He probably knows when he's hungry, when he's uncomfortable, and when he's tired. And that's about all the self-awareness he has. Now that he's, almost 5 months, he's starting to become a little more physical self-aware. So he's understanding that he's a person and he has hands. He doesn't know how to operate them yet, but he understands he has them. And so I think that there is a small level of self-awareness that we're given, but with every experience, every sound, every wrapper package that is opened, every drawer that is closed, we're logging it and we're able to grow from these experiences. And just like you said, it can also come from our childhood, it can come from society, it can definitely be taught. But the longer you're alive, the more opportunity you have to build the self-awareness.
or to also lose it. So some
Mm.
ways to lose the self-awareness, like it's not necessarily that it's lost per se, it's that you're not aware of it. It's like hidden, and those the way it kind of goes away temporarily is for one autopilot. And I was talking to Dan about this, my husband, yesterday. I had this dream years ago that was super powerful. And in cartoons where there's like those big black bombs with like the thing, and then you light it and it's like going and then it explodes. So my
Hmm.
dream was this huge black bomb, like the size of a house, and it was in the middle of the street, and the fuse was lit and it was about to go off. And then on the side of it was like thousands of people at a concert, and they're all like, yeah, and they're just like having fun, and they're totally unaware that they're all about to die because this big black cartoon bomb is right next to them. And I am like shouting from another building through a window, like, guys, 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 there's a bomb. You gotta move. And they had no idea. They were unaware of their surroundings. They couldn't hear me. They couldn't see the bomb. And it was because of this distraction. And I'm going to be careful and say that not all music is bad, not all media is bad, but it can consume us. And if we are constantly scrolling on social media, if we're only listening to music, if we come home and we drop off our keys, take off our shoes, and turn on the TV, we're completely zoning out, and we're unaware of our thoughts, our emotions, the temperature in the room, what our pets need, what our kids need, what our self needs, because we are distracted. And that autopilot behavior is a perfect formula for losing any kind of self-awareness internally or externally.
What a powerful visualization, Annika. I love that you brought that up with autopilot because I think you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. Maybe they don't have some of these other signs, but they're just kind of going through life, on a hamster wheel, doing the same thing, waking up at the same time, going to the same activities, hanging out with the same people, and not realizing that there's so much more to life, including what's happening inside of them.
hmm And routine is super important. I think everyone should have routines, and the highest performers on my real estate team have the best routines, and they never get sick because they do. They wake up the same time, they show up the same time. But you can still have routines and be self-aware. You can have routines and be intentional, not just on autopilot. You can be thinking about what you're wearing, what you're needing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking while doing your routine. So I don't want to confuse those things of like, oh, then we can't have routines. You can have a routine and not be on autopilot.
Well, I agree. And I love my routine. My routine saves me when I have one. It's been a new adventure with a new baby, but it's those listening to those intentional cues. So maybe the routine is to wake up at 5:30 every day and go to the gym. But if today you wake up and you're like, actually, I feel like I could use another hour of sleep, not because you're lazy, not because you don't want to get up, but because you're listening to an internal cue. Or if you normally are the loudest person in a room, you're often the first to speak and you're, answering all the questions and you're very engaging. And for some reason, when you walk in the room today, maybe it's a meeting, maybe it's a party, and you just get the feeling that maybe you shouldn't speak as quick or as loud. These are listening to those internal cues. It's not stopping who you are. It's making those small adjustments, like, millimeter, adjustments on a dial, just very small micro changes. So yes, autopilot is a huge one. I would even add burnout. And I think often we go on autopilot because we're burnt out, right? We get
Totally.
decision fatigue. So, if you're burned out, you're going to constantly misread situations. Your reactions will be so much bigger than they need to be. And you can't always tell what you're feeling because you're operating at such a max level already. You're already maxed out. So there's very little room to vary your emotional response. Burnout really puts you in survival mode, and it makes it really difficult to tune in for those micro changes on that dial.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what people, when they are so burnt out, that's when they turn on the TV. That's when they scroll because they don't want to feel or think because they're exhausted. They are burnt out. So if you are on autopilot, which then can go into burnout or burnout can cause autopilot, either way, both of those will totally make you lose any self-awareness. So it's important to stay out in front of it. Like it's always prevention instead of trying to fix it after the fact. So like how can you prevent burnout? How can you prevent autopilot? And that again is being self-aware and checking in with yourself.
Yes. The other one that comes up to mind is social conditioning and childhood programming. I remember from a very young age, we're taught, be nice, be good, be quiet. Or children are seen, not heard, right? We have all these like micro programs from when we were either in school or at home. And sometimes there were good lessons, right? That maybe we were screaming and we were out of order and our parents were trying to get us to be more respectful in public, right? But if you get the wrong cues, or if your parents get burnt out and they're unable to really take this, rearing of children as intentionally as they would like to, you start to get things like, stop being so dramatic, which makes you feel like you can't express your emotions. And so a lot of these things come from our childhood and our social programming. Keep the peace, boys don't cry, are just some of those examples.
Yeah, I remember feeling that way. And like you and I both love our parents. I mean, they did the best they could, and we're so grateful for them. And there were things that they did unintentionally that would shut my emotions. Like if I was crying, sometimes mom would laugh. And like I never understood that. And so to me, it's like, okay, so my emotions are funny, like you're not taking me seriously. And I probably was being ridiculous. Like when I was a teenager, saying like, you have to let me use the car. And mom's like, I don't have to let you use anything. And I was like, yes, you do. I'm your daughter. I was being like totally a teenager, but my emotions were not validated. I wasn't seen. And so then those things can make me feel like, okay, well, why have emotions if I'm just going to get shut down, if I'm going to be
Mhm.
quieted? And so then I stop being aware of my emotions because I'm muffling them, like I'm pushing them down. I'm not paying attention to them because emotions equals bad. And then
Mhm.
on the flip side, you can also become hyper vigilant. Like if they're constantly correcting you, you become overly self-aware, which then makes you forget who you actually are, what you actually need, because you're trying to fit into the mold or the program that your parents or mentors or church or leaders or whoever want you to do. And you become so hyper vigilant that every move is like robotic, and then you're not actually aware of who you really are.
Yeah, you start walking on eggshells, or you start becoming a people pleaser, and you actually disconnect from your needs completely. And your whole dial is based on your parents, your spouse, your teacher, or anyone that you hold in high regard, totally negating your individual feelings and those internal cues.
Okay, so now we've kind of told everybody they're not self-aware and they've got all the symptoms, and this doesn't mean you're bad, but let's talk about like what do we do about it? How do we build self-awareness, Britannia? Like what like if we're all not self-aware, where do we begin?
Right. Well, like we said, that self-awareness isn't something that happens all at once. It doesn't happen overnight. My child is slowly building self-awareness, and you and I have built more self-awareness going from our 20s to our 30s. So, one of the ways that you can build self-awareness, no matter what your age is to name that emotion. So, when you name a feeling, you take yourself out of that reactivity. So if you're feeling that flooding sense, you go, okay, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling frustrated. Maybe it's embarrassment, right? Not everything is anxiety. And I know we like to label it as such when we don't know how to name it, but take the time to go, maybe it's just exhaustion. Maybe it isn't actually frustration and anger and embarrassment. Maybe it's exhaustion. So it sounds really simple, but by naming it, and doesn't mean you have to walk around going, I'm frustrated, I'm exhausted, but to yourself, naming it, calling it out will help um, give that control back to yourself. And then you'll become less reactive. And then you can shift and be more intentional about how you're feeling. I would say the next one is body-based awareness. So your body is often telling you the truth. I love this about our bodies. Like we are having, I believe that we are spiritual beings having a earthly experience, a human experience. And part of this experience is having a body. And so we haven't had a body before. We got to build some of this awareness. So when you have a tight chest, maybe you are feeling anxiety. I would also say that in your chest is where your heart chakra is. And there are seven chakras. We can get into that at another time, but it could also be that you are feeling a lack of love towards yourself or to someone else. So, listening to this, heavy shoulders, you're feeling pressure. Maybe you actually have a physical backpack, or maybe it's a spiritual or a metaphorical backpack, and you are just carrying this burden like you are Atlas and the world is on your back. Pay attention. You mentioned your posture. I wonder if part of why you struggled with your posture is maybe you felt pressure and you felt this weight of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of it has to do with like you said, like social conditioning or like what you grew up with. And I know that I get that tightness in chest. I know I get the knots in my belly. And for me, like going back to the naming the emotions, I didn't have the vocabulary of all the emotions. And so I needed to physically go look at a list of emotions so that I can name them because the only ones I could name were angry, sad, happy, frustrated, upset. Like it was like five. And then I looked at a list and I was like, oh, actually, I'm feeling disgust.
Mhm.
How often do we say, like, I'm feeling disgusted or I am feeling annoyed? Like you're not angry, you're not frustrated, you're just annoyed. And
Mhm.
that's okay. And so, like, looking at a list of emotions can also help give a name to what you're feeling. And sometimes we just need to look at it and then checking in with your body and noticing what you're doing, feeling that rising temperature, the heavy shoulders, or whatever it is, and just thinking like, what am I feeling in this moment? What does my back feel like? Oh, my back's kind of tight. I didn't realize I've been living with a tight back this whole time, or whatever it is.
Hmm. Yeah, and when you pay attention to those sensations, you can catch the emotion before it takes over. Your body is always talking to you. Most of us have just either never learned to listen or we've kind of turned down the volume. And so by building that self-awareness of calling out the emotion or calling out where you're feeling it in your body will help build that self-awareness. This also leads to our next way to build self-awareness is daily micro check-ins. Think of these as little temperature checks, right? So you're constantly checking in with yourself. How am I feeling today? And it's okay if it's not happy, ecstatic, excited, right? We want to have all of these great emotions, passionate, motivated. Maybe you're feeling annoyed. Maybe you're feeling disgusted. Maybe you need to look at a chart to understand what your emotions are, right? But by doing a daily check in, what am I feeling? What do I need? Am I acting out of intention or am I acting out of autopilot or out of burnout? You know, just checking in. And this doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't even have to journal this one down, guys. This can take 10 seconds and you can do it when no one is looking, right? No one knows that you're doing internal check-in. It's kind of like doing Kegels. No one knows if you're doing Kegels. Like maybe I'm doing Kegels right now. But you could do this internal check-in and no one knows. It's quick, it's easy, and it will keep you from being reactive.
You can habit stack it too. So that anytime you're checking in with somebody else, like, what do you need? How are you feeling? What can I do for you? Then ask yourself those same questions right after. You're already in the habit of putting other people above yourself. So just ask yourself right after you check in on somebody else.
And when you do this more often, you'll realize that you should check in with yourself before you check in with someone else because you don't want to offer, oh, yeah, I can babysit, or yeah, I can bring you food, or I can go to this party. Maybe you're burnt out. Maybe you actually need time to rest. So, yes, habit stack it. And pretty soon you'll notice that you can flip flop and you'll notice that you can check in with yourself really quickly. And then you'll be able to check in on others more efficiently.
And another question you can ask yourself is when you're checking in with yourself is like, what part of me is actually speaking? I know for me, rage, when I had babies, rage took over. Like I was me, but it was the rage that was talking and that became harmful, right? And so, or it could be, is this the little girl in me? I remember one time, or is it my mom's voice? There was this one time I was talking to Dan and I was realizing I sounded just like mom. And it's not a bad thing, but in that moment, I was like, whoa, I'm being mom right now. And I physically shifted my body to like another part of the room to kind of like physically tell myself, like, you're not your mom, you are you. Let's step back into you. And I did. And he was kind of like looking at me like, what is going on? And I was like, I was my mom over there, but I'm me over here. I needed to make that physical change, but that's like tuning in with yourself. Like, this isn't me. This is the part that's addicted to gossip, like we talked about in the last episode about habits, where you could be addicted to like mental, emotional types of habits. Is this the perfectionist part of me? Is this the procrastinator? Is this the protective or defensive part of me? And think like, oh, okay, I am in this state right now, and this is just a state that I have, but it is not me. It is not my what my counselor called soul dominion. And so I'm going to go back into my soul dominion and not let the perfectionist, scared younger part or my mom be the one talking, but the true self, my soul, be the one that's in control.
Oh, this is so good. This is also really useful when you are interacting with others and in conflict. So when my husband does something that is disappointing, instead of me saying, I am completely disappointed in you, as his wife, as his life partner, as a mother of his child, that can be really defeating when maybe he just didn't unload the dishwasher, right?
Hmm.
So saying a part of me is disappointed, and that part is the part that has noticed that you are a dependable person and you do normally show up. And by saying that this part of me is feeling this way can also help you better communicate how you're feeling to another person.
And it might feel weird in the moment, but I've gotten really good at this in conflict because every relationship has conflict. Another thing that women like to fantasize about is that your relationship's supposed to be perfect and free of conflict, and it's not true. Every relationship, friends, family, partners, spouses, whatever, it all has conflict. And it's okay to say in the moment, I'm being really defensive right now. Like, I don't think I can have a productive conversation. I need to go cool off for a little bit because I'm just in a defensive state. And you can name it in the moment. You can take a minute. And if the other person's like, we need to talk about it right now, they're not respecting your boundaries. And you could say, like, listen, we're going to escalate. This isn't going to turn out good. Just give me 10 minutes. Let me get out of being defensive and I'll come right back. And then it's always going to be smoother after that, as long as they, allow that and respect that boundary.
Annika, this is so good. This is mindfulness in action. Realizing in the moment that your body is tensing, you're flooding, or that your tone of voice is changing. You don't have to wait for the other person to start to feel defensive or attacked, right? You can catch it and you can call it out, and it will always diffuse the situation. Doesn't mean you don't have your argument or disagreement, or in my family, we call them squabbles. We don't fight, we squabble. And, so, just being able to call it in the moment, and it's really cool. And it's something that the more you do, the easier it will get. And this will allow you to choose a calmer response and be more intentional, because not only does every relationship have conflict, but we need it. We need conflict. If you are in a relationship and you're not ever in conflict, everything is just hunky dory and, everything's the status quo and everything's fine, it's just kind of like lukewarm, then you're not pushing each other, you're not growing. The reason why we have conflict is we're hitting against each other's boundaries, and you need to be able to communicate when those boundaries are being hit. So please know that if you are, having conflicts, disagreements, arguments, or squabbles, that it's a perfectly normal and healthy way to not just build that relationship, but actually grow connection.
100%. And, this is just some ways that you can build self-awareness. There's more. I encourage everybody to look up different ways to build self-awareness. If you have other ways to build self-awareness, leave them in the comments in our podcast section. And I want to ask you, Brittany, like, is there anything else we can do? I mean, we kind of been coaching along this whole way, but is there anything more that we can do to kind of self-coach us into building that self-awareness with those things that we talked about?
Yeah, I think what we could do is take everything that we just went over and create a little check-in, right? So, we talked about naming that emotion. What am I feeling right now and what's underneath it? Just like with our habits, that we learned that some of our habits are basically these masks for how our actual feelings are and what we're hiding from, or emotional vacancies. It's the same way. So, acknowledge, yeah, maybe I'm feeling anxious, but I'm feeling anxious because I have, put all this work in and I'm not being heard, and just digging a little bit deeper, calling out the emotion, and then asking yourself more questions. Also, asking, what story am I telling myself? It's okay to feel an emotion and not know where it's coming from. This has happened many times in my life when I've been breaking patterns. I would feel this anxiety and this like fear, like, oh, Jason is cheating on me. People are talking about me. And it's because I was in the process of breaking this self-defeating pattern that I just felt this constant anxiety that the world was out to get me. And one day I was in the shower and I felt this anxiety, and I was like, oh no, the feeling's coming again. Someone's talking bad about me. Jason must be cheating on me. I'm going to lose my job. And then I realized maybe my body is just remembering the emotion. And so
Mhm.
I asked myself, Britannia, do you have a reason to feel anxious right now? Do you have a reason to be scared? And I was like, no, no, I don't. Okay. Doesn't mean you're going to stop feeling anxious, right? But you don't have to look for a reason. You don't have to tell yourself a story, because that can make things far worse. Asking yourself, is this really true? Or is this an old pattern that is speaking? This is when the shift happens, when you start to notice. I'll never forget that moment in the shower, because I could have just been like, yep, definitely going to lose my job. That's what the feeling is. But instead, I allowed myself to feel the feeling without attaching a story to it. And then ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? Maybe it's just to breathe. Maybe it's to set a boundary. Maybe it's to take a break. Maybe it's reassurance, whether you get that from someone else or you give it to yourself. This is not what you think you should need. I know I get caught up in that. What is expected that I need? What do I need? You can be a total boss babe and still need the reassurance, and that's okay. And I would add, the last thing is ask yourself, what would your future self say about this? Imagine a version of you that has already healed, has already gotten used to building the self awareness, to calling out these emotions. Do they have any advice for you right now? Maybe no advice. Maybe it's just to point out some perspective to help with a perception shift. Maybe it's just to tell you that you are enough and that you are loved. So just doing this check-in will help you get to a place that you're starting to build that self-awareness, not just after the fact, but actually in the moment.
I think this is such a powerful checklist, and this is all like where you're actually doing coaching conversations with yourself and some other practical exercises that you can do to help you become self-aware, like going to places like doing neurofeedback. Neurofeedback trains your brain, and it's a very powerful tool that's helped expedite my self-awareness. I recommend it for everybody. It's helped me perform better. It's helped me just notice. It was when I noticed that I was sounding like my mom, that was shortly after I started doing neurofeedback. So this is something that you could go search in your local area. Usually it's like a functional doctor or a therapist or a counselor of some kind that offers neurofeedback. So I would look into that. And then something that helped me with my physical self-awareness is yoga, because a yoga instructor, as you know, will say, relax your face. And I'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was tensing my face. Relax your shoulders, pull a little bit deeper, notice what you're feeling here. And I didn't realize like how tense I was until someone told me like, let your shoulders drop. I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was holding them up this whole time. So yoga is a very powerful practice to notice what your physical body is doing. And then also being humble enough to receive the feedback from other people, because people are going to point out things that you do way faster than you will ever notice them. So if someone that you trust, your sister, your spouse, or a friend is telling you, you're doing this thing, be humble enough to consider that you might actually be doing that thing. And then you might notice it. Wow, yeah, I guess I do that. Thank you. I didn't realize I was doing that. You have now helped me become more self-aware, which then becomes empowerment, not victim, not, oh my gosh, you told me something's wrong with me, but you can be empowered because now you are more self-aware because you trusted somebody's feedback they were giving you.
Yes, yes. This is self-coaching, guys. This is not fixing, this is not judging. This is staying curious through your evolution. And every time you take yourself through these questions, these checks, or are receptive to feedback, you're building this muscle of self-awareness. And just like hitting the gym or doing yoga, the more you do it, the easier it gets, and the stronger you get. You learn to understand yourself instead of reacting to everyone else. And this is where real change begins. This has been another episode of the Be Your Own Life Coach podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, subscribe and share the love. And remember the teachings of Lao Tzu. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Until next time, trust yourself, take the wisdom, take the breath, and take the next step.